In this session, we're going to be discussing Windows Firewall with advanced security. This feature allows you to configure what type of network traffic is permitted to pass between your computer and the network. You can configure Windows Firewall to say that you only want a certain type of network traffic to pass between your computer and the network. We have what we call inbound rules and outbound rules. You can configure what type of traffic goes out. You can configure what type of traffic comes in. In addition to that, Windows Firewall allows you to provide security to protect traffic as it travels across the network. We're going to look at some settings in Windows Firewall, and we're also going to configure a custom rule. We're going to access Windows Firewall by clicking on Tools, Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. We want to now review the current configuration settings by right-clicking on Windows Firewall with Advanced Security and clicking Properties. We have some profiles. We want to take a look at these profiles. We're going to click first on Domain Profile. So we are on Domain Profile already. And domain profile applies when a computer is connected to its corporate domain. So here you can modify the settings, inbound and outbound connections. You also have the private profile, and this profile applies when a computer is connected to a private network location, such as a home or a workplace. And you see here you have the inbound and outbound connections that you can modify. You also have the public profile, and this profile applies when a computer is connected to a public location. So those profiles exist, and we can go and we can modify those profiles. We want to close the Windows Firewall with Advanced Security. To create a custom rule, we can make sure that you're on Inbound Rules here, and then you click on New Rule under Actions on the right-hand pane. Now we have different types of rules. You have a program, a rule that controls connections for a program. You have a port rule, you have predefined rule. What we want to create is a custom rule. So we're going to click on Custom. Then we want to click on Next. And we're going to go with all programs here. So we're going to click on Next again. And you can choose the type of protocol you want. You can choose the protocol number. For our example, for our protocol type, we're going to choose TCP. And we're going to choose port 80 for HTTP connections. So we click the down arrow and we choose specific ports first, and then we choose 80. So we can go ahead now and click Next. Here you get to choose which local IP addresses does this rule apply to. And for our example, we're just going to select any IP address. If you want to configure for a particular IP address, you would have to click these IP addresses and you actually put the IP addresses in. But for our exercise, you're going to leave it at any IP address. So the two sections are which local IP address does this rule apply to, and what remote IP addresses does this rule apply to. And again, for our purposes, we're going to choose any IP address for both and go ahead and click next. What do we want to do on the action screen? Do we want to allow the connection or do we want to block the connection? For our example, we're going to block the connection on that port. So we click on block the connection and then we want to click on next. Then when does this rule apply? And we had looked at domain, private, and public. You see you have three checkboxes. They're on by default. So you can remove one if you don't want. Remember that the domain applies when a computer is connected to the domain, your workplace. Private, when the computer is connected to a private network location like your home. And public, when a computer is connected to a public network location. So again, domain would be your corporate network. Private would be your private network, your local network. And public would be the public network location. So we want to go ahead and click next. And then what you want to do is to type a name for your firewall rule, and the name we chose is MCSA class firewall rule. And then we want to click on finish. If we want to, we can go and disable or enable a rule. If I right click here at the top, MCSA class firewall rule, you see that I can disable the rule. See, the rule here is enabled. To disable it, we would right click and you would click disable rule. So let's review the purpose of the firewall one more time. Remember that the purpose of the firewall is to control what traffic is allowed to come into the network and what traffic is allowed to go out of the network. At the most basic level, firewalls can block traffic intended for particular IP addresses or server ports. That is the end of this session. I want to thank you for listening.